I just want to point out that no one's actually reached out to me to talk about these bumpers. But I've been hearing things. So we're gonna have a talk after we record this episode.
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 167. I'm your host, Ryan, here with the other host, Edge.
What's going on? I'm excited to be jumping in to normal content because, especially for people listening to this, it's been a while.
Yeah, welcome back to the present. It's one of those cases where if you've been listening to our standard numbered episodes, the last couple have had a bumper in front of each episode to introduce the fact that those episodes were recorded before Arcane. So we want to make sure everyone was aware. I think we had like 6 episodes recorded before we started the Arcane Season 2 stuff. So those are going up and you'll hear those before you hear this one in order. But this is the first one where it's like, oh, well, we didn't record this beforehand. This is fresh content, and it will reflect that because we're talking about Ambessa, right? And she was a character that came out, if I recall correctly, during, like, right before season 2 came out, and then Mel came out while the season was going on. So it's been a bit confusing. And there's also a comic book now as well, and the book. We'll get there, right?
We'll get there.
We'll get there. We just wanted to make sure everyone was aware, like, what was recorded when, right? So you're not confused if we say something that Arcane Season 2 changed in those episodes, then just disregard it. We'll get back to it. Things are changing. It's been obvious that Riot has decided to use Arcane as a retcon vehicle, which is fine. It's just going to mess with the content a bit as we record, because we never know, like we don't know when that Welcome to Noxus, because of how confusing the title was and the description. We don't know when that's coming out, so it could come out, in the middle of us recording other stuff. But we do want to make sure we get Ambessa and Mel and their comic and start talking about the book at some point, so on and so forth. So we're ready for that season.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that, like, especially because of the fact that it's been like just the time gaps with the recording, with how we've been releasing and everything. So it's been a lot of time for us, a lot of time for the listeners too. And I just want to point out that no one's actually reached out to me to talk about these bumpers. but I've been hearing things. So we're gonna have a talk after we record this episode.
Listen,
it's so good to be back. It's so good to be back.
I have his signature on all these. Every bumper has been signed and initialed. All right, housekeeping. We don't need any signatures for that. Up top, as always, you can listen to us everywhere. Visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info. Email us at podcastcore@gmail.com. Remember, that's podcast COR. Follow us on all the platforms because that helps us with discoverability. We appreciate it. And leave a like and comment wherever you watch or listen the most. But word of mouth has gotten us this far. So tell a friend to replace empathy with ambition by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
God, that's ominous.
Well, I mean, for what we're about to talk about, it's pretty sad. And, we rambled enough, but there's a bit more we have to go into. So today we're talking about Ambessa's bio that we are calling Chained to Ambition. And another confusing part is who wrote this. So we did some digging. We tried to dig around to see, like, okay, who's getting credit for these specific things. And this may be a change of the times post Arcane Season 2, because this has been listed as being written by Laurie Goulding, who we've spoken about his stories before. But there's also additional credits where it's partly credited to Taylor Dinwiddie and then Ellen Stimmel, and then also Elise Lemoyne, who we've covered some of her stories as well. So it seems like because this is related to Arcane, there are more people touching the individual stories. Because remember, after this story came out, she had a character that's in the game, and also her book was coming out not too long after. And also, there's a comic that references her in relation to Mel as well. So it must be a case of, hey, we need to make sure our narrative is real tight with these characters, considering that everything is still live, right? This is not like, oh, here's Fiddlesticks' story, right? Which was written a decade ago by a person. So it,
And
we can't give any one person credit. So we just want to make sure we named the bulk of them, just in case.
and it's a good point as far as like mentioning that the fact that Arcane has such implications on some characters' stories, specifically like Ambessa, and when we can get to it, Mel, because these are characters that were originally written for the show and not for the game. So, like, this is also going to be an interesting thing because this is the first jump that we have of kind of making Arcane actually canon, right? So this is already like a lot of different hands have touched this,
Yeah.
and the implications of affecting more than just the world of Runeterra. Like this is affecting a TV show, a video game, multiple video games. It's affecting the stories that we get later too. So the I feel like this has got learning curves on it, whether or not we actually acknowledge it. And it would be great if someone like Laurie would hit us up and just kind of give us a rundown of how it's written on the back scenes.
Yeah.
Not, and it has nothing to do with the fact that I just want to talk Laurie's ear off.
Yeah, if you're one of the authors and we miss credit and you're listening, well, thanks for listening. But also let us know and we'll correct it. Or if you know one of the authors and you're listening, correct us as well. We're not past being corrected, as you can tell by the bumpers in our previous 6 episodes.
I've been hearing things.
Yeah, but we do want to make sure that people get credited because they do good work. And the cool thing about this situation for this story is with all those 4 people I mentioned, those are different varying experiences. Some are veterans, some are like junior level, and Taylor, from what I understand, was an intern that has gotten his writing chops like as a full-time employee on this Mel and Ambessa story. So that's cool to have that varying experience on this world that they're building for these new characters.
It makes it very exciting to see like where the world's going to go because boy, Riot's already done a great job of just kind of putting us on deck and getting us excited to see what's happening next. And this is just the tip of the iceberg for it. So let's talk about Ambessa.
Yeah, story best told in 3 parts. We've yapped enough. If you skipped this section, welcome. All right. So we start off with finding out that Ambessa is basically a Nepo baby. The Medardas weren't like an old money family in Noxus. They weren't one of the original old noble houses, but they were one of the most powerful families in the modern age of Noxus.
And the best comparison that I think we could put this to is like looking at a story like Jace's, because Jace does come from a relatively well known name, but not necessarily from like old money,
Yep.
right? It'd be like that family in a small town who's really well off for the small town, but none of their assets have been liquidated. And
That's actually
so
good.
and Bessa Medarda kind of grew up the same way, which is kind of interesting seeing how the characters are so different.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk more about because like as Hetch has mentioned, Jace was sponsored by people with more money to get the opportunity to climb the ladder. But the whole Medarda thing being not only a wealthy family, not only a powerful family, but also a large one, like an extended one. That's We're gonna talk about that in the general discussion section. So stick around. But we then see Ambessa as a child, and her first exposure is to violence, right? And that's through watching battles to the death in the Noxian arenas, which we've talked about at length, and we'll talk about more in the future as we talk about more Noxus, right? As we get ready for Welcome to Noxus. And then one day after the Battle of Hildenard, always love a named historic battle, her father sends her out to collect the blades of the fallen soldiers. We know how important this is for how they bury their dead. And that's another exposure she gets to death. It's becoming very normalized. And with these experiences, essentially conditioning Ambessa to see death in battle as a sacrifice, which in Noxus is considered a noble thing, it becomes the way she thinks, right? It's the step that needs to be taken in order to reach greatness. Sacrifice must be made. These are tenets that are being drilled into her in a very young age.
Yeah. And this is something that is very important to every culture, whether it be fantasy or in real life. It's important to every culture for a warrior system or a warrior ideology as far as to normalize that death. We get to see
Yeah.
it as far as in our own history with cultures like Sparta or the Japanese samurai,
Mhm.
where it's death is a part of service. That is a noble thing, and this is a very gruesome and graphic way to be like, yeah, this is how Mbessa was ideal or like turned on to the ideology, but it's also a message that's very necessary for a warrior caste system. If you don't have this in place, who's gonna go die for you?
Yeah,
Like, like that's
exactly.
it's a heavy toll.
You want to get rid of the question even being asked as, hey, is all this death necessary? You don't want that happening. Not in a
No.
warrior nation.
No, 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 no. Like instead, let's just go ahead and be like, nah, this is a great thing. So go get their tombstones. Go collect them.
So we get more information about the Medardas, that where they started. They started as a trading family on the northern coast of Shurima. So, a little bit of geography time. As we've told you before, Noxus is north of Shurima. So the northern coast of Shurima would be paralleled by the southern coast of Noxus. And the family code mimicked the virtues of the desert fox in Shurima, but also the fearsome wolf of legend. And that's the named wolf, not lamb, but two halves of kindred. They worship the wolf half, or they 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 behave and accept the tenets and ferocity of the wolf half. They don't fuck with the lamb half. They could care less. Um, but all these experiences, along with the family history, meant inevitably you get the, the weakest twist ever. And Bessa becomes a soldier when she grows up.
Yeah, and this is the part of the story that is just like, really highlighting the imperial nature of Noxus,
Yeah,
right? Because this is a Ambessa didn't really want for anything. Because sure, she's not in the strongest houses in Noxus. She
yeah,
doesn't have any political power at all. Her family doesn't have that. It's just a big family name that, 60% of their offspring join the military.
yeah.
And I'm not saying that there are certain cultures in the world that do that actually, but it's not a far-fetched thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we all, Hetch is joking here because you do meet people where it's like, oh yeah, my grandfather served, my father served, my brother served, my sister served, my mom
Yep.
served, I served. It's like it was bound to happen, right? And you have those same tenets of what that life means drilled into you from a young age. So the same thing applies here. And this takes us to part two. So in part two, we find out that her grandfather, Menelik, was the patriarch. He was the active patriarch of the family, and he gets to live to an old age. And this is also interesting because remember, her father was the one that sent her out to get the blades, which means her father's also in the military, and both her father and grandfather are alive. So to be a military family and still have multiple generations functioning, that just shows you how big this family is. And Ambessa, as now a soldier, quickly rises through the ranks, right? She becomes a general, is in charge of a bunch of war bands, and she also becomes one of Melnick's favorites. And at this time, Ambessa kind of lived to the fullest. She was living the life. Like, think about it. You just got a basic, right? You're getting medal after medal. You're, partying with the boys. Like, she experienced everything in the way that she wanted to and had a good time doing so. And then she had her first child, Kino.
Yeah, and we've talked about this at length on the podcast,
Yeah.
which is, sometimes younger people get a hold of some money and they gotta go get a Dodge Charger. And
Bard shows up. He's
and
like, hey,
this
kid.
is this is the greatest this is the greatest example of equality in the genders because Ambessa was right in line at the Dodge dealer. Like, get me my Charger. I'm gonna enjoy my shore leave, baby.
Yeah, and it's clear, if you've listened to our Arcane stuff. And by the way, as we talk about Ambessa and soon talk about Mel, there might be some spoilers here because these are very important characters in season 2 of Arcane. So we can't really avoid talking about
Yeah.
certain stuff. So be aware and listen to that stuff if you haven't. Get caught up, right? And
That's a
yeah.
that's a spoiler to the spoiler coming up. Like, why would you spoil the spoiler?
Listen, it's hard not to. Like, this is a we're trying our best, man. We're ducking and weaving, but we can only do so much. But I brought that up because in the show, it's very clear that Ambessa's bi. Like, she's down with anything. Or possibly Pan, right? Like, she doesn't have a preference. She just wants to have a good time, especially when it's on her terms, right? She's definitely a assertive, dominant person in all the things she does, which is part of the problem with her personality. But
Yes.
when I said she has her first child, Kino, that doesn't mean her whole life changes, right? She's still doing her damn thing. But it does introduce something new to her, which is the concept of unconditional love. So up until this point, most things have had conditions, right? Like, even being a part, so Noxus being an imperial nation is very unique compared to like Demacia. We talk about this all the time, where Noxus, there's an equity there. There is a meritocracy within the military, right? So as long as you're strong, as long as you're willing to are able to fight for yourself, then you will be supported by the nation, right? You have to earn your keep, like Hetch mentioned, Spartans, right?
And I'm glad that you brought back up the Spartans because Kino teaches her two lessons, and
Yeah.
it's not unconditional love or solely
Yeah.
unconditional love. That's the first thing. The second thing that she learns from Kino's birth is disappointment
Yeah.
because we've all heard the tales of Spartan babies getting tossed off of cliffs.
Yeah.
All right. And unfortunately, Kino doesn't make the Noxian cut. And that, for something that Ambessa has finally learned to love unconditionally, she now has to figure out how to keep Kino metaphorically getting tossed off the cliff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the first time that she's starting to understand what a weakness is. And for her personality, she doesn't like having weaknesses because your enemy can exploit your weaknesses. She sees everything through the lens of battle, right? And this is including that. So when she ends up pregnant again with her second child that we know to be Mel, there's an incident in her homeland of Ruckrind, which she's fighting because she's Ambessa, and she almost dies trying to protect her homeland. And while she's at death's door, she has this vision that strengthens her resolve and her ambition tenfold from where it's already at. Obviously, that's a reference to the music video that came out, I believe, right before Arcane Season 2 premiered. And she survived. And she vowed from that point forward to focus on gaining power so that the world could never exploit the weaknesses she saw in her children because she would be in control of it. Now, this is obviously, this is how we wrap up part 2. This is obviously the wrong way to go about all of this.
Yeah. Yes. This is obvious. If we're looking through the lens of an adjusted human being,
Yeah.
this is the wrong way to view things. But as far as for a Noxian soldier, not just a Noxian soldier, but a Noxian general that actively climbed the ranks
Yeah.
instead of only using nepotism to get to their station, and through the lens of a family that follows the way of the wolf,
Yeah.
like again, Kindred's wolf, which as far as in Kindred's bio, we know that this is like the same wolf that Freljordian tribesmen follow, of just like, you know what, no, go out into the tundra, we're never
Yeah.
coming back, we're gonna live off the kill. Like that, when you put your mindset in that idea, it's like, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. No, like just full on ruthless. The wolf doesn't think. The wolf acts on instinct. The wolf goes for the throat.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where we have a cinematic, right? With Tryndamere, in which the premise is that when Tryndamere enrages, it's when he's on death's door, right? And him enraging is personified as him constantly fighting. I keep using these, metaphors and stuff like, no, actually, this is what it is in Runeterra. Is Tryndamere is literally constantly fighting Wolf for his soul when he's enraged, right?
Yep.
And for a culture that looks at themselves as the wolf, that just kind of gives you a little bit more when we talk about things like the cinematic where Darius is fighting Trundle. It's like, okay, there are connections here, not just regionally between Noxus and Freljord, but even on a spiritual ideal level.
It's almost like this is how folklore gets born.
Yeah, exactly. Rest in peace, Udyr. He's not dead, but if you've heard those episodes, you know why. He's living in hell.
Rest in peace, Udyr.
Yeah, his mind is in hell for all
Yeah,
we know.
he's the dog in the burning house saying this is fine.
All right, part 3. So now her ambition accelerates her, and so does her power, right? She goes, shoots to the top. She was already, an impressive figure from an impressive family, but this was the icing on the cake that is pretty much the Ambessa that we know, right? Post season 2. Um, this is what also started her what do you want to call it? Her process of leading from the front, as we've seen in an action scene in season 2 of Arcane. And she does this because she wants to, like we say with Tryndamere, she wants to constantly face death again, right? It's one of those things where she's not shying away from the experience she had, which could you imagine being pregnant and almost dying in a battle and looking at that situation and going, I need more of that to make me stronger. Well, that's what she's doing. And it literally scares everyone shitless into like, no one's going to challenge that authority, right? And soon after this, we have Melnick passing at a very old age, right? He lives his life. And when he passes, he doesn't name an heir. And she sees that as a huge opportunity because remember, her father's still alive. That means there's a whole generation ahead of her in the line of succession as it would usually function. But she skips that line. He uses fast pass immediately.
Yeah, and we like don't forget that there's, before the passing, like Ambessa is the favorite
Yep.
as far as like the active serving Medardas. She's the favorite of Melanik, so she probably has a lot of connections that she can use to jump that line.
Hmm.
But it also makes a point to or the author makes a point to highlight that she doesn't do it through like subterfuge.
Yep.
Like she's not sending out assassins for her cousins. Like it'd be like there can be only one.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, I'm gonna jump the line by doing good old like Noxian wet work.
Yep.
I'm gonna go and take out the enemies of Noxus and the enemies of the Medarda at the same time and advance in that manner. And she is quite successful at it.
Oh yeah, she pads her resume. And she's able to ultimately defeat her rivals and earn that position as the matriarch. And her whole thing is kind of fits what the family wants. She wants to promise that the legacy she will leave will be worth the family name. And she leads us with her personal mantra that then becomes the mantra of the Medardas, which is, quote, in all things, be the wolf. So once she gets to this position of power, she immediately colds like all of the weakness from her ranks, and she demands obedience in her cause. So you have to be strong, but you also have to know your place. And then her final act was to send Mel away now that she's matriarch to Piltover so that Mel, which was her last weakness, quote unquote, couldn't be used against her.
Yeah, and this is playing into the same weaknesses that Ambessa saw in Kino.
Yeah.
This is that same concept because, again, like it's like if you don't make the cut as far as for going into a military caste system, the way that these warrior cultures work is that you are less than.
Yeah.
You can no longer be treated as an equal human being. So this is Mbessa's way of protecting Mel from that, which is very interesting because this is happening post the Rock Run experience.
Mhm.
This is happening while Ambessa is living the mantra of "in all things be the wolf." This isn't wolf behavior.
Yeah.
Like this is motherly behavior of just like, no, let me get you out of here. And that's the end of her story, right?
No. The end of her story is the beginning of Arcane season 2, pretty much. Which is,
Yep.
years later, she hears about this invention, quote unquote, called Hex Tech, discovered in Piltover. She considers Piltovians to be, they're soft spine nerds. And she knows that there is potential in Hex Tech. In her mind, it's military potential, and she wants to exploit that. So she travels to the Gilded City and she uses the excuse of her daughter to do so. And her main goal is to find out if this new tech could benefit the legacy of the Medardas, because that is her sole goal.
Yeah. And we know as far as Ambessa's journey into Piltover, that picks up in Act 3 of Season 1 of Arcane.
Mhm.
And that's pretty much like where we know her bio leads. And for everyone who's, watched Arcane, or if listened to our episodes, thank you. Uh, we know what happens from like for Ambessa's story there.
Yeah.
And it is really cool as far as like how this is written to just really, kind of put you right on the doorstep for Arcane. And it's like, if you know that info, great. If you don't, you can go pick up and keep continuing Ambessa's story, which is really cool. I do love that little connection, and very excited to see, the more Ambessa content that we get. Cough, cough, book club, cough, cough.
Yeah, so this is a very smart way to do it, as Hedge mentioned, because when you have the show running at the same time the character's coming out, the same time the bio is coming out, the same time the book's about to come out, same time the comics coming out, you have to balance how these are all connected, because you don't want it to seem too, you know, you want people to be able to enjoy any of those mediums individually, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that's where our story wraps up here. Obviously, we'll talk about Mbessa more, but in the general discussion section, the main thing we want to talk about is knowing the possibilities that are now available, because we now know for a fact the Medardas are a large family. That's huge, right? Because that means in Welcome to Noxus, Mel's not returning to a place where she's like the last Medarda, right? She just wasn't raised there. So she's entering a system that's like, oh, I have cousins, I have uncles, I have, who knows still alive? Who knows if there's other kids, right? Her mother had so many secrets. We don't know if Kino was just the only one she told her about.
Yep.
But that
And
also means that you now have a massive network of Medardas. You have Mel coming in, and you also have the massive network of everything else, right? There's other families. There's obviously Katarina's family. There is the Black Rose, which is its own organization. There's all the government stuff. Like, they've really set it up. I think this was a smart decision because everyone's on board with Ambessa. People loved Ambessa as the villain character, and people
absolutely.
obviously love Mel, and Mel was so well done, so well written, so well set up to be the narrative vehicle for going into Noxus. But this is just icing on the cake for me.
Oh, absolutely. Because the having the knowledge as far as the extent of the Medarda family reach, because it sure they're not like the biggest house, they're not a very wealthy house, but from the sounds of it, the Medardas are synonymous with the military,
Yes.
which the only other characters that we've really seen that have had any really real pull on the military as far as like political pull on it are characters like Swain and like to a certain degree Darius, but not even
Yeah.
Darius really has political ties. He just has the loyalty of the men.
Yeah.
And but he has no ambition in the political game. He believes in the message of Noxus, whereas Swain actually has that political pull. It's interesting to see that like the Medardas actually had that pull. Like
Yeah.
Ambessa really set them up as far as, kind of pulling the whole family under heel and then continuing to make a name for herself. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of mess Ambessa wasn't taking care of in Noxus because
Exactly.
it's not like she appeared immediately in season 1 of Arcane.
Uh-huh.
I even just said that's act 3. So, what business did she leave behind? And so, even if we don't get to see cousins, even if we don't get to see like a long lost sibling, there's there's no way that she's left, just everything tied with a
Yep.
nice little package and a beautiful little bow on top. Like, no, it's going to be a mess because she was trying to get hex tech. She wasn't focusing on that stuff. So, what kind of mess is Mel going to be showing up to is just going to be a very exciting thing to look forward to.
Yeah, and we know, obviously you look at like Roman empires, and we know that when it got too big, right, when they brought too many people in and your leadership couldn't be everywhere at once, well, then ambitions were able to, run free and people would do things. So Ambessa going to Piltover, as Hetch mentioned, left an open window of who knows what. And the also the accelerant in this situation is the Black Rose because her going to Piltover, as found out, wasn't just to go get Hex Tech. We know that she was trying to get away from the Black Rose's influence as much as she could as well. Well, the Black Rose, the most of their influence is in Noxus. So if Ambessa's gone, Black Rose is still operating in Noxus at full capacity. They're definitely trying to tear down her empire and her legacy while she's gone,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
So
So it's like, how much damage did they do?
yeah.
Or like, did they do damage? This is a Black Rose we're talking about. They're not going to be thinking on the same plans that like the usual tropes happen because they're thinking like 1,000 steps
Yeah.
ahead because they've been doing this for millennia. So why worry about, dismantling Ambessa's empire when we can build it up and then put a puppet in it? Because that could be something that's happened too. What if Mel shows back up and it's just like, yo, you're the richest woman in Noxus?
Yeah.
And it's, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like that's the beauty of like an organization like the Black Rose is that there's really no predicting what they're
Oh,
doing
that's actually a
because
great point.
they're playing such a bigger game than everyone else.
Because
So
that
who knows?
you made a great point because in the, in our Welcome to Noxus cinematic discussion, listen to that episode. I think we get into some stuff. But LeBlanc mentions making a risk, right? Taking a big risk that usually a Black Rose wouldn't take. And one of those risks, to Hetch's point, could be an open hand invitation to Mel, right? Like bringing her in and be like, hey, you're set. You're still in power. Medardas are good. You're the head. Here's all this money. Here's all this influence. And seeing if she takes the bait or if she really wants to rail against the system that her mother has built. And that could be the risk she's considering. But that's the fun of the Black Rose. And I envy the writers for Welcome to Noxus because you have so much to work with. If you mess
So
this up,
much.
it's because it's because this is not thin. You have a lot to work with. So much so, and I said Welcome to Noxus, as we say here, Arcane Season 3. But you have so much material you guys have worked for. And listen, we believe in you. This is not to be a mean girl.
Oh no, no. Again, I started this episode by saying it's like if someone knows Laurie Goldman,
Yeah,
hook us up,
yeah,
and it has nothing to do with me wanting to fanboy over some Warhammer stories.
yeah,
It's this is like they have all the tools, not only as far as for the world building, but like the tools in the authors
yeah,
themselves. This is a friggin' stacked lineup when it comes to fantasy writing. So
yeah.
it's like this is not coming from a place of fear of where we're going and messing this up. This is more of just saying we want you to give us a finished product, and you've already been provided the entire formula.
Yep.
And not only have you been provided the entire formula, it is written a way to where even to the uneducated, it looks like 2 + 2.
Yeah.
And all you got to do is write 4. That's all you got to do.
Just write it down. Listen, tropes aren't bad when they're done well. So we'll take it.
100%.
You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we'll leave it there. Obviously, we're excited. This episode has been a bit of a ramble fest because it's been a while since we've gotten back into our normal content, right?
Yeah.
So expect more. And as always, if you made it this far, thanks for listening. And we'll be back soon for the next episode.
Yeah. Take care, everybody.